Hey everybody, welcome to J Stern Designs. Today for Thursday's quick tip, I'm going to show you how to cut out your muslin trouble-free. When I went to class yesterday, some of my students had some things we had to fix on their muslins because of minor construction errors. I want to show you an easy way to organize your muslin pieces after they're cut out. And I'm going to talk about this little pesky piece right here. This is the back yoke. And this piece can be a little tricky. One of the ladies in my class actually sewed her muslin together so that the center back had the side seams and the longer center back on the yoke was on the side seam. And she was really concerned that the back of her jeans were going to be too low because it felt very low in the back. And indeed it was, because you'll notice there's a significant difference between here and here. And once we took these apart and flipped them around and sewed them right, she was much happier. So I'm going to show you how to avoid making this mistake. And I'm just going to show you an easy way to cut out a fit muslin without having the front pocket, without being tempted to cut out that front pocket, because you don't want that front pocket shape cut out when you make a fit muslin, because then you'd have that air conditioning or that hole right there when you sew the legs together. So I'm just going to quickly show you, a few things about that. All right, so let's get started. All right, so here are my pattern pieces that I have ready to make my fit muslin. And I just want to show you, I took my pocket bag pattern piece and I matched the notches and I attached it to the top of my leg, because I don't want to cut out the front pocket opening in my muslin. So to get the right waistline, just match your pocket bag, that's the piece that doesn't have the cutout for the front opening, on top of your front leg. So then the front is ready to cut out. I have my yoke and I have my back leg as well. All right, so these are the pieces that I'm going to cut out. All right, so after they're cut out, I just want to show you how to prevent making two lefts or sewing the yoke on incorrectly. Sometimes having a visual cue of the layout really helps. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my back pieces and I'm going to lay them on the table with my grain line and knee notches face up. And I can visibly make a left and a right back, because you can see I've got my left and right crotch points in opposite directions. That way I know when I go to sew this, the lefts and rights, I'll have a left and a right, not two lefts if I have them like this when I go to sew them together. So I've made a set, a left and right. And then the yoke so we know that the long side is the center back and the short side is the side seam. But sometimes in the heat of sewing something together, you can screw that up. So what I like to do is just place it right on top of my leg like that. Let me get a little closer so you can see. All right, and then I'm going to place my other one like this. All right, so see, now I know I've got my center back with my back yoke on this. I've got my, my center backs lined up. So when I go to sew those together, I know I'll do that right. It's really easy to sew it like this, matching the center back up with the side seam. It doesn't look wrong unless you're really paying attention. So, make yourself a left and right set, and then you know that these pieces are ready to sew together. Okay, I'm going to pin them so that my seam allowance will be facing out into my, where I marked my grain line. So when I sew it, it'll be like this. Another good idea while you're laying these things out, if you have a pattern that has a lot of different seam allowances, mark the seam allowances right on your edge of your muslin while you're laying things out. That way when you go to the sewing machine, you don't need to think about it. So I know, for example, this is a 3/4 inch seam. Okay, so I can put, you know, 3/4 right there, 3/4 right there. So when I go to sew them together, I'm not going to screw it up and sew the wrong seam allowance. I know that my back crotch is 1/2 inch, and that will prevent me from sewing my side seams to the center back and vice versa. All right, I've also got my fronts laid out. I don't need to lay these out in a left and right set per se because I have nothing to sew to them like the back leg and the back yoke. So I'm just going to put these together so that when I sew it, the seam allowances are going to be facing the outside. So my grain line and my knee notch, which are the important things to transfer to your muslin when you're working on jeans, is going to be on the same side as my seam allowances. All right, so in this case, I'm going to write right here 3/8 of an inch because that's the seam allowance for my front crotch curve. And I want to extend it up into the zipper seam allowance, which makes it a total of, it's going to be up here. So I can make a little stop dot. So I know when I sew my front crotch together, I can just sew right there to about right there. This will give me enough room to get into it and have it closed enough that I can fit the front crotch curve. So I would start sewing here, 3/8, and I would just finish right there. All right, so that's my front crotch curve. All right, so now this muslin is ready to sew together, and I can sew it together safely without making the mistake of sewing my back yoke on wrong or making 2 lefts or 2 rights. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that quick tip. If you have any questions about sewing a fit muslin, please post them below or visit my blog at Stern Designs. One last thing before I go, I just want to hold up this muslin. This muslin got first prize for all of the notations. She really made notes about everything on the muslin, and I think it's a good idea. So feel free to use your muslin as a canvas to, put design ideas or write down seam allowances like I showed you. Certainly put all your notches on there. Notice she has lovely notches along the seams. And she also made note of all the adjustments she made on her pattern. So this is really useful to have this information on your muslin as well as your pattern pieces. It does take a little more time, but I have to say that I really enjoyed working with this one, and she left it in class. So if you're watching, here's your muslin, and I'll bring it back with me when I come back 2 weeks to class. All right. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Next week, there will be no quick tips because I'm going to be shooting my first video class for Craftsy. So I'll be on set in Denver. It'll be very exciting. But in any case, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Have a nice week next week. And I'll be back with fun quick tips for the week following.